I'm making a retro-inspired survival horror game called The Revanchist. Until now, I've been making smooth progress on this game and was starting to feel pretty. Now watch a really simple feature put me right back in my place. So to start off, I want to put together a simple forest level for the game. Because I'm going for a more realistic vibe, instead of 100% committing to the retro aesthetic for this game, plan for this was always to have individual 3D foliage. Now, I still wanted to evoke the feel of a retro game environment, so I played around a bit finding the right balance and how to actually model everything. After a few tries, I settled on the look that I felt was right for the game. To pull it off, I grabbed some old asset pack trees I had laying around, took some screenshots on a pink screen, I guess? Pink screen? Took some screenshots on a pink screen, then I used these to create textures the exact same way you've seen in my previous devlog. The actual model is super simple. A basic trunk runs up the middle, 4 bent planes make up the leaves, and 2 more planes make up the branches on the trunk. After making the tree, I tweaked the shapes and proportions to make a couple different variants. I also made 4 different leaf textures, giving me a lot of unique variations. I also used the same workflow to make a dead tree and a couple of small plants. And the bushes are actually just squished treetops. So if you've ever found yourself wondering why this retro art style is getting so popular lately, consider that beyond any aesthetic reasons for this, the scene in front of you right here was put together, including the foliage from scratch, in about an hour. So to make the actual level, I learned how to make a super basic spline mesh for the path, built the landscape around it. I threw the foliage into the scene quickly and carelessly for now. I'm gonna go redo it from scratch with more attention to detail and more thought towards optimization later. This is just to get a good feel for things. And that brings us up to this point, the sneak peek that you saw at the end of my previous devlog. If you've seen this, that means you're a real homie. We're not done yet though. So just a quick note to any aspiring dev out there. If you find yourself building levels like this, congratulations, you're at the same level of game design that I was until about a week ago. And you are wrong. Learn how to use spline meshes. Honestly, it's not that hard and the time and effort saved is so enormously worth it. I wish I looked into this earlier. Anyways, I kept working on putting together the forest level, adjusting the lighting, the way the path curves around, etc. The foliage is still a placeholder, but I won't be redoing it until later. I actually had a lot of fun putting this level together. I've never done anything like this before. I also put together this background track for it. Like the other music so far, it's tossed together in GarageBand on my phone. I think it's on the right track for the vibe I'm looking for, but for now it's a really short loop and I just can't figure out how to add any depth to it. I also wanted to add a little cabin tucked away in the woods. Thankfully, this was a lot easier to make than the house since it's only a single room. Once again, the interior decorations have all been quickly blocked out with existing assets just to get a feel for the space for now. And so I wanted the cabin to be a bit of a microcosm for my philosophy towards hand-holding in The Revanchist, which is basically reward exploration and punish laziness. What I mean by this is a lot of the game's content, story, and a lot of the more interesting, unique game mechanics will technically be optional. If someone wants to just rush through things, they technically can, but the real meat of the game is for those who want to experience it. Here's what I mean. If you're rushing down this forest path just to get to the end without looking at what's around you, you're probably going to miss this cabin. Best believe that I always do it when I'm testing and just powering through this level. Yet despite this, if you're looking around and observing your surroundings, it's almost impossible to miss. I actually spent a long time tweaking this corner to balance it like this. And this is how I want the content to be hidden from the player in The Revanchist. It's not hard to find, it's just easy to miss. And this has been core to the game since the first version. I also want to have multiple endings tied to this exploration. Anyways, to make sure I keep making consistent progress on the game, I like to bounce back and forth a bit. Do something I like, such as putting together levels like this, then something I don't. Like programming mechanics. Why don't I like programming? I'll get back to that soon. For now, it's time to add a very important feature that I've honestly been a bit scared of messing with. Saving. Now, saving the game is one of those things that seems super easy to program, but I had a sneaking suspicion that it would be a royal pain in the ass. And as always, I was right. I began this by assigning keys to save and load the inventory. It took me a little bit to set up, but I eventually got it working. After that, I also had the game save data on an autosave file when a level transition is triggered, and load it when the level starts. This is where my descent into hell started. First problem is that in a lot of ways this is basically my first game. While I'm generally a good enough problem solver to figure out how to make things work, the real issue is making them work together. For instance, when I programmed the system for equipping and unequipping weapons, I knew I'd have to find a way to save that, but I had no idea what that meant or how it was going to work. This means it was really easy to get it to save what weapon was equipped, unless there wasn't one, in which case the game would just shove a gun into the player's hands. It was an easy fix, and I thought I had a solid grasp on how it all worked now. Getting everything else to save is going to be smooth sailing. If only I knew how wrong I was. Anyways, blissfully ignorant, I moved on to the next order of business, which is knowing where to start the player when the level starts. The problem with a non-linear game is you can enter most levels from multiple entrances, and in general you want the player to start the level in front of the entrance they came in from. Thankfully, this is a very rare occasion that I've actually done something like this before. You see, I used to make games on Game Maker back when I was a kid. Almost all of it's lost except for 2 of them. My first game ever that I made when I was 7 years old, and this, made when I was 12 or 13 out of entirely stolen assets. One thing I struggled with for a long time is how to start the player in the right spot when you go between rooms. The answer is actually really simple. Let's look at the forest level for instance, which for testing purposes has 2 entrances, 1 and 2. 1 links to the house, and 2 links to the office. And all I have to do is add a value which I'll call the spawn ID. Every door out of a level will have a spawn ID attached, as will every save point and spawn point. When you go between levels, the game saves the spawn ID from the door you activated. Then when you start a level, it grabs that spawn ID, finds the spawn point with that same one, and moves the player to that location. It all sounds simple because it is, but don't get me wrong, this did also give me trouble. Just stupid mistakes, typos, shit like that. No big deal, before long, it was working perfectly. Okay, well this isn't too bad, definitely not worth all this fuss and a clickbait video title, right? I mean, I'm maybe 3 hours into working on all this, and all the foundations are here. Okay, well, it's time to make items save. The important part is if you pick up an item, it shouldn't just pop back into existence when you come back to the level. That being said, I'm still deciding whether I'm going to use some sort of item box or just have the player discard items, so I want to have the ability to save item transforms, counts, and be able to spawn items that don't normally exist. But I'm starting simple, and I just want items to stay gone when you pick them up. Should be simple. Okay, this is boring as fuck, so I'm going to keep it real quick. The best way I can think to store this data is in a 2D array, the first dimension being the level's unique ID, the second dimension being the object ID, which is just a unique integer generated at runtime to easily identify objects. When you load into a new level, it'll grab every item and search for it in the array. If it finds it in the array, it would load that data for them and remove it from the array. That way, once it searched through every item that was placed in the level by default, the items left in the array would be the items that were dropped by the player, and then it would go through that list of remaining items and spawn them into the world. But I haven't made it that far yet. My first approach here had a couple of problems. First of all, for some reason, Unreal does not do 2-dimensional arrays, at least not in blueprints. I don't know C++, but I'm pretty sure it would have multi-dimensional arrays, but I found a workaround using structs. It bloats the code a bit, but it gets the job done. The real problem is I was able to cobble together a basic save system for the player. I didn't actually understand how saving and loading really works. Nor did I understand the way objects communicate with the game instance, the way the game instance communicates with the save game, or even really what a game instance and save game actually are. Because I had never programmed something like this before and fundamentally don't understand how it worked, it got complicated very quickly. I also don't know a whole lot about debugging, which didn't help. I couldn't think of any good ways to test each individual function, such as checking for items in the array, adding items to the array, sending the data, etc. The only thing I could figure to do is just code everything from the ground up in one go, then start testing and getting it to work. Now for the real trouble. Getting a game to save can be tricky. Getting a game to save with no memory is something else entirely.
But Travis, what do you mean no memory? Is there some weird limitation in Unreal or something?
No. The game is normal. It's me that's the problem. You see, I struggle a lot with memory. Things like coding complex, interweaving game mechanics can be a very difficult process for me. For reference, not long ago, I got home from work, then watched a movie. After the movie, I went to start making some dinner, get to the kitchen, think to myself, Jesus, it's almost 8. When did I get home? It's been a couple hours, what the fuck have I been doing? Thought it over for a bit. Oh shit, that's right, I watched a movie. What movie was it? I had to go back to the living room, pull it up on the TV to figure out what I had just watched. So believe it or not, after seeing how much I struggle to add very simple features to my game, I did actually go to university for computer science. And I proceeded to drop out in my second year. Even though I knew a couple of coding languages and probably could learn C++ to some degree, I use blueprints because having a clear visual flow line for the code is a huge deal for me to be able to make sense of things. It's not just that I forget how my old code works or anything, I forget what I'm doing as I'm doing it. I'll be midway through putting together another chunk of code and think to myself, hold on, what am I trying to program here? What am I doing? And I have to stop, trace my code back to the start, try to reverse engineer it to figure out what's going on. Usually I can cope with this well enough, makes things take a lot longer, but it's not a huge obstacle. Unfortunately, because this was such a complicated feature that was so hard for me to debug, and that I just could not find a way to test any individual component of it, things started looking a bit bleak. So all this being said, probably shouldn't surprise you to hear, it didn't work. I kept chasing it as best I can, adding mountains of print strings to get an idea of what was going on. I spent 16 hours in total doing the asshole shuffle back and forth, tweak this, tweak that, add a print string here, add a print string there. And not only were things not getting better, they were breaking further, starting to occasionally just randomly wipe the player's inventory whenever it felt like it. Saving is a critical feature for the game, and I just couldn't get anywhere with it. Something that had long since become a theme in the development of the Revanchist is knowing when to let go. So just like the previous versions of this game, I take a look at my save system, and I realized it's time to cut my losses, and wiped it, starting over from scratch.
The next day.
The new save system works in more or less the same way, the only difference is I ditched support for dropped items for now. I'll still be able to add dropped items later, but this is a lot simpler and easier to work with. I spent a day rebuilding the whole thing and it was still giving me trouble. Even though it could save and load data from the correct level ID when the level starts, initializing all the data properly, it would refuse to save the data passed to it from an item properly. It would always try to save the item under level 0, regardless of what level the game was actually on. My heart sank. I was so close, but so far. I spent 3 more hours debugging this before I noticed something. Oh. Okay. Well, I take my wins where I can get them. As much as I'm not happy I wasted so much time on it, frankly, the new system is so much better than the old one. Just to make sure that I'll be able to expand on it easily, I added functionality for it to save transforms as well. And for basically the first time ever, it just worked.
Nice.
Something else I've been putting off though, character modeling. This time I started by making a simple metahuman, took a few screenshots, and also exported the meshes as reference. Then I butchered the metahuman and made this garbage. Then I used texture painting in Blender, which I'm really trying to learn because 3ds Max just ain't it. Okay, so in-game it actually looks fine. The low screen resolution does a lot of work, making the game look a lot more detailed and realistic than it actually is. Just lets your brain fill in the gaps. But this is pretty much all I've got to show off for now. There's a couple other things I've been working on, but nothing I want to talk about in too much depth quite yet. Before I go, here's a quick look at the forest level as it currently sits. So I hope everyone enjoyed the video. If anyone has any thoughts on the project or anything they've seen here, I'd love to hear it. Any sort of feedback is always appreciated. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.